Hey everybody, how's it going? Dan Shinder here on Drum Talk TV with Drumming Injury Talk with Dr. Nadia. She's right there, Dr. Nadia Azar from the University of Windsor, Canada. How she looks so nice and tan if she lives in Canada because she just got back from vacation in Mexico. Muy bueno. Welcome, Nadia. How you
Muy
doing?
bueno. I'm good. I'm good. Nice and relaxed. Yeah.
Great. We're recording this episode because a pogo stick flash mob or something, I'm not sure, knocked over a Wi-Fi tower. So it's not doing too well. So we're recording this. And I'm going to send Nadia the link. She'll go through, answer questions, comments. So feel free to ask questions or tell your story. If you have a drumming injury, if you've gotten past a drumming injury, if you're not sure what a drumming injury is, we're going to tell you right now. We're talking about things that affect tendinitis, carpal tunnel, bursitis, arthritis, shoulder pain, neck pain, lower back pain, sciatica, different things like that. And they can happen from repetitive motion, which a lot of drummers do, right?
A little bit.
Whether it's marching or hand drumming or drum set, whatever it is, it can happen. Could also happen from bad posture, bad ergonomics, the way your set is set up, maybe not so favorable for your physiology. I'm a fairly short person, maybe 5'7", used to be 5'8" before I had all these 11 kids. Another story, now I'm about 5'7", and I can't put stuff too far to reach for show because it's not good for me. And then what was the third, Nadia? Why do I always forget the third?
The third one is force.
Force, of course. Just hitting too hard. Be careful on the ballads. Be careful all the time. Let's start with posture. The more I've learned about all of this in the 3 years that the two of us have been doing the show, folks, the more I wince when I see drum sets set up being played by a guy around my physiology. How long can my arms be, right? From 5'7" or whatever. And I see that big China's way up there and a splash tree over here. And I have a big drum set. One of my drum sets, maybe you've seen it, the big blue monster. It's very big, but I've moved stuff in closer and lower. There's one thing I think of every time I hit it. I think of Nadia because it's just at that extended reach point, right? It's like right within the border, if you will. So when I see sets like that, being played by someone that's a little shorter, smallish, or whatever, I go, because I know they're probably going to get hurt. And on my best days, I'm about to turn 60 soonish. On my best days, in my best shape, I can get hurt. You can get hurt. So posture is a huge thing. And Nadia, how does one, this may go more into the Department of Psychology, but how does one balance? I want my setup to look cool. Drummers have the largest palette of vanity on stage unless they're playing with Rick Wakeman and his 22 keyboards. And, you know, we're a big part of the stage set, if you will. The guitar isn't. That's like a harmonica compared to a nice drum set, even a modest size drum set. So how does one balance that but still be healthy and not set up too ridiculously out of reach, if you will?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And part of it depends on the size of your kit and how many items you have in it. The more stuff you have, the harder it is to get things within your ideal reach envelope, which is where so there's an ideal length that your muscles operate under, where they produce the most force for the least effort. And that's within that range is your ideal reach envelope. Too close, too short, and your muscles can't generate enough force, and too far away, they're too stretched out to be able to generate as much force. And so you have to try harder.
Yeah. Is it just as simple as common sense that whatever feels comfortable is probably where you should keep the limit within for the most part, other than something you might hit not that often?
Yeah. So going back to the comment about setting up your kit, you want to put the things that you use the least often. You know, if you've got a particular China or something that you use 2 or 3 times in a show, you can put that way out here because you're only reaching for it a couple times. And as long as you're not reaching with like a ton of force or trying to put a ton of force through it when you're reach that far out, it's a lot less likely to lead to a problem than, say, you know, putting your primary crash cymbal that far away, or like, as ridiculous as it would probably be, like your hi-hat, something that you're using all the time, you want within your ideal reach envelope, where your joints are going to have, like they're at their best working range of motion, your muscles are operating at their optimal length, and so you're less likely to run into issues that way. So going back to, the trade-off between sort of setup and showmanship, I think there are probably ways that, again, depending on how many items you have, if you want to have those grand gestures, either set it up strategically so that if you're going to do it a lot, keep stuff within your reach envelope. And then if you want to do the theatrical gestures, that's sort of like they're extra, they're not necessary.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So then the other thing would be, like I said, if there's a particular song or a particular part of a song where you want this big, grand movement, then put those items, if you can, again, depending on the number of items you have, if those are things that you only use for that particular part of the song, then again, if you're only doing it once or twice during a show, it's probably not that big of a deal to have it kind of out here. What you don't want is the stuff that you use all the time, requiring you to reach like that, because that's when you increase the likelihood of running into problems. And it may not be right away. It may not be this tour. It may not be next year's tour.
That's a great point.
But in 10 or 15 years, you're out on tour and you're like, why is everything sore? I've been setting up this way for years. It's because you probably shouldn't have been setting up that way for years. And things need to move in at that point.
The irony in what you just said. Yeah. Why is this happening to me? I've been playing like this for years. The answer's in the question, as it usually is with anything.
Yeah.
One more thing.
But it's hard to know that when what you've been doing has been working. For years. It's hard to know that.
Yeah. So you develop a comfort zone for it, and your muscle memory and all your stuff is where it is. My set's like that. And there's one other thing regarding posture, and then I want to move on to force. You know what I've noticed sometimes is sometimes guys or girls have their let's see how far back I can. Am I wearing pants today? Yeah, okay, this is safe. So like if their left leg, if they're right-handed, right-footed, and if their left leg, if their hi-hat is too far this way, too far parallel with their body rather than in a more sitting natural position, that can cause hip problems. And sometimes I see the hi-hat positioned out this way because, like my drum set, I could accidentally do that if I wanted to, because I've got multiple toms up here on the side, and if I wanted to bring them in closer and lower, I'd have to move my hi-hat over. But then this bothers my hip if I do that, so I compromise, and I sit on my blue kit when it's set up as the big kit, where I'm in a normal sitting position and my bass drum is cocked at that angle. I'm not set up where my foot is lined up straight ahead and my body's twisted. I'm like this, basically. On my jazz kit, my 4-piece, which I don't play as often, it's set up traditionally, and I have the hi-hat in closer because there are no other drums over there. So it is kind of like sitting in the sitting position. I'm just not facing the front of the kit. I am still sitting like that. The snare is does that make sense? It's kind of centered. So I think that's one of those things that some people don't think about. They think about what's going to make my setup work, putting what it's doing to their body or what their body is doing with that setup secondary, tertiary, if they even think of that. And I've gotten, of course, so much more conscious of it. One more thing, and this relates to that hi-hat issue and gear. I struggled with the position of that for a while because I was fine with my smaller toms being the height they were, but my hi-hat, and here's a question for all you drummers, please put it in the comments, but my hi-hat spindle was high enough to where I had to raise the drums slightly out of where I wanted it to make sure that spindle wasn't getting, I'm all tangled up. I don't want to just take a hacksaw and go, do they make shorter? Like I've seen people they're this tall. What's up with that, guys and girls? Tell me how I can fix that. Maybe I do need to just get out the saw or the torch or the bolt cutter. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they have, but like, and maybe that's the solution. Maybe that's what people have done, or I don't know if they sell stands, and maybe that's like a kid size stand or something, but they use it because it keeps it. I don't know.
Or different height
But
spindle. I'm afraid to take it apart to replace it and then never get it back together again.
yeah.
So force, let's talk about force.
Mhm.
And before we even get into the drum set, um, when people are in like drum corps, and if any of you are in drum corps, please chime in, correct me if you need to, add to the conversation, because I'm not in drum corps. I was in drum corps for 2 months when I was quite young. And I told my parents, I don't want to do this. It's too regimented. It's like being in the army. That's not me. And they said, okay. So I went from drumline into PE. This was my first year of high school 1,000 years ago. So I might not know what I'm talking about when I say this, but it seems as though a lot of drum corps players do a lot of stuff that has a lot of force. Now, maybe it just appears that way because of the motions, because you can easily snap and at a short distance and get great volume, great power without doing this. But is that the same as force, and it's just affecting your hand and fingers more than it is this? Or is that part moot because force is force, it's still going to vibrate through your whole limb? And I know sometimes people sound or make it look like there's a lot of force, but it's not. And with the Kevlar heads, it's like playing on a tabletop, so it's easy to get a loud sound. But I think you know what I mean when I say it's not always doing this to get a loud sound. They're playing more with the wrists and the fingers. If there's too much force, that can still affect the whole arm by vibration's sake. Is that correct?
Yeah. So a couple things. I mean, force and vibration are two, in this case, related phenomena.
One's caused by the other, right?
Right, because the vibration that's coming from drumming is, I mean, drummers are used to thinking about vibration in terms of like the resonance of the drum head and the sound they're getting. But when I'm talking about vibration, I'm thinking about the vibration that's like reverberating up your arm from striking the heads or the rims or the cymbals or that sort of thing. So that's coming from the impact of your stick onto an object. And because the stick is wood, that impact transmits through the wood into your hand and then up your arm. So the harder you're hitting that object, the more, like, the greater the shock and the more vibration transmits into your body. But the other issue is when you are hitting hard like that, or even if you're hitting softly, but if you're generating a lot of muscular force, a lot of muscle tension, tense muscles become stiffer, and stiffer objects allow more vibration to move through them than objects that are less stiff. Right. So again, think about, striking a drum with a hickory drumstick versus like a pool noodle.
It's exactly.
Two very different,
it
materials.
Feels different in your hand. Yeah.
Totally. But they're going to transmit vibration very differently. So, but with the increase in muscle tension, so I hate to say it, kids, but your drum teachers were right. You want to play relaxed for multiple reasons, not just to not get fatigued and not just because it sounds better, but also because the more tension you carry in your muscles, the stiffer they're getting and the more of that vibration is being allowed to transmit into your arm. And vibration is known, in particular, it's associated with the onset of carpal tunnel syndrome. So we don't want that. So one more good reason to play with as little muscle tension as you can manage.
Awesome. Thanks. What's funny is I almost checked the comments on my monitor as if we were live, which we're usually doing. So let's say I'll make up a couple comments. Oh, Herschel Messerschmidt in Miami, Arizona, right next to us says, what does Dan's shirt say and where can I get it? Oh, it says relax. We were just talking about relaxing, but this is different. Relax. The drummer is here. Official Drum Talk TV gear at drumtalktv.com/shop. There's one other here. Cindy Schleichenheimer says, what are these gloves I see listed as the brought to you by? In the post. The MetaFlex Therapy Glove, which is a compression glove that can help with blood flow. They're also cool to play in if you're the type, to play with gloves on. And they actually feel really neat. And you can adjust the tension. And it's also for strength building. It can help reduce swelling. I see Nadia's got hers. It can also reduce swelling. So like if you have arthritis, and I do, and this has helped immensely. I hardly feel arthritis. Yeah, and I had Enja check my knuckles the other day, and she said, wow, I can't even tell anymore. Whereas before it was very obvious. So these are really cool. You can get a huge discount if you click on the link that's in the post after you finish watching the show. Yeah. And Nadia, you had why don't you just explain it here, what you said in the comments about the reverse thing, so that Nick and Taya can also talk about it. I thought that was very interesting.
I was playing around with them yesterday and wearing them, and like I told you, I don't think I have the right size. I think they're too big for me because
they kind of look too big.
Yeah, I have them cranked down, and I still that's not
there's not a lot of resistance for me. Yeah, they look bigger.
Yeah, they're a little big, so I'm not getting the compression and that stuff. But so I was fooling around with them, like, okay, I can see how you'd be fighting against that. And then I thought to myself, well, what if if you have an issue with your hands where your muscles cramp up and you tend to be more in this position, what if you actually needed to work the opposite direction? Could you do it? And so I just tried putting it on the opposite hand and playing with it the other direction. So let me just get it into place here.
Nick and Taya are going, what the heck?
What is happening?
Nick and Taya, you never know.
So now the resistance is on the inside. So now I'm working.
How interesting.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay, that it works that way too. I'm sure that's probably not at all what they intended, but I was fooling around with it, and I thought, you could do it both ways.
That's how science happens. I have a shirt that says, what does it say? It says science, and then it says, fuck around, figure it out. And that's what you did.
The original. Yeah.
Excuse my language, kids and parents. Yeah. But we will get you another size. So folks, when you get yours, there is a sizing chart. We did send one to Nadia, but it was in American English, not Western Canadian English. There you go.
And I did measure, but I don't know, maybe my hands are just on the smaller side or what have you. But I don't get the compression, the all around compression when I put them on, but I also don't have arthritis, thankfully.
Right.
Like I said, maybe not yet anyway.
Yeah.
So it's for me to wear them, I couldn't test out that relief giving aspect of the glove because I don't have that. So it's not going to.
And that's great. I was going to say a couple of things. I was going to say, because you're so young, but arthritis can affect really people at any age. It's known as an older person's, that's why I have it. It's known as an older person's disease, but people in their late teens, 20s can get it. You know, it's funny, when I first met you, side note, everyone will get a kick out. I thought you were like 24. And that was 3 years ago. Yeah. And then you said, started talking about your kids are in sports and stuff. I'm thinking, well, maybe I hadn't met Dory. So I thought, well, maybe Dory's in his 60s and he's got 30, what's going on here? So congratulations. Let's talk about, here's the big trick. When you got the big three that cause drumming injuries, you got posture, bad ergonomics, a lot of reach, things like that. You got force. We talked about force. How does a drummer avoid and do preventative maintenance on repetitive motion? We're taught to warm up. We're taught, some people, guys and girls, are doing 3 45-minute sets a night at the pub. Maybe someone's just, pro drummers are doing a hard hour and a half, and they're rehearsing and they're recording and they're working out. How do you avoid that if there's only one way to do repetitive motion, unless there's something I don't know?
Yeah, it's really hard to deal. Obviously, you can't, take repetition out of drumming. That's like, so normally, you know, if I was going into a workplace to do an assessment and try to change things up to get rid of some risk factors, I would try to get rid of the things
Repetition.
that are increasing the risk. But you can't get rid of repetition in drumming. That's kind of the whole point. So
does stretching help that,
ways
Nadia?
to manage it?
Yeah, is that where stretching comes in?
It is, but stretching in and of itself is not really enough. So warming up, really important, so that your joints and your muscles are moving and you know, smoothly and things like that. So warming up's important, but really, if you can't get rid of repetition, you have to manage how long you're exposed to it. So trying to get as many breaks as you can. So, which obviously during a show, it's really hard to do that, but you really got to try to make use of any micro pause, like I call them micro pauses, that 5, 10, 20 seconds between songs. You know, put down your sticks, do some finger stretches, do some wrist rolling or whatever, you know, areas that are bothering you, but do something to, you know, make, you know, the most of that break. When you obviously, you know, you can't take a 5-minute break during a show typically, but you definitely want time off the drum set, you know, every day, and not just at night when you're sleeping. Like, you need, if you have to put in 4 hours of practice today, you really want to do it in, like, you know, practice for not even an hour, I would say, like 30 minutes, and then take a 5-minute break, and 30 minutes and then take like an hour's break and come back to it, kind of thing. Like, you really have to give your tissues time to recover from what you've just put them through. If they don't get adequate recovery, then every time you start exposing them to that risk factor again, they're starting from a deficit, right? So then at that point, the potential for your threshold for injury is lowering. And so at some point you're gonna see the two lines of the graph cross, and that's where you get an issue. So managing exposure at that point becomes really important. Also doing, you know, there's no silver bullet to injury prevention, but things can help. And so strength and conditioning exercises, and that's where things like stretching, good flexibility come into play, strengthening your muscles to be able to handle, being able to generate those loads. Lifting weights also strengthens your tendons, and so they can handle the force being transmitted through them better. So all those things combined will help to offset, like, the conditioning helps offset the demand, basically.
Thanks. With all of that, I have two questions, and I'll ask them one at a time. How much does hydration come into play to possibly help with conditioning or minimize injury risk? Are you more likely to get injured if you're not as hydrated, and we're talking about force or repetition?
I don't know that there's a direct correlation to hydration and injury, but if you're dehydrated, your body's working harder than it needs to, because your heart's got to pump faster and harder to move your blood because there's less volume. So there's more stress on your system. When there's more stress on your system, also, you know, for fatiguing and things like that, moving away, the byproducts of metabolism, of exercise, of physical exertion, getting that out of your muscles. If that's not happening as quickly, then you're getting buildup of that stuff. You start getting fatigue and even like brain fog from being dehydrated potentially. So you now are maybe more prone to making mistakes that lead to an injury, or not holding proper posture because you're tired, and that leads to
and then
an injury. So I don't know that there's like a 1-to-1, like if you didn't drink your 2 liters of water today, you're going to get injured, kind of thing. But it's hydration is part of the system of keeping your body primed to handle demand. So
thanks. My other part of that was forgetting for a moment about any previous hand injuries or elbow, or sans any previous injuries. How much does temperature come into play? Could drummers be more likely to get injured if they're playing outdoor gigs and it's really cold. You know, this time of year, the East Coast is cooling down in the northern hemisphere of the United States, East Coast anyways, and Canada for sure. Does that make it more likely to get injured? Does that make the vibrations of force magnified? You know, different things like that?
So again, I think in a secondary way, or in an indirect way, I should say. So, you know, talking about extreme heat, when it's that hot out, you're not dissipating your body heat, you're getting dehydrated, leads to all the things we've already talked about. When it's really cold, you might be expending more energy trying to keep your body warm. If your muscles are tight because you're cold and you're shivering, then again, that's stiffness, excess stiffness, that's then allowing more vibration transmission, inefficient movements, excess muscle tension just fatigues your muscles. So then you're getting out of that proper posture again, which could lead you to, you know, to postures and positions that could lead to injury. So, you know, the cold in and of itself, not necessarily like a direct,
but the effects of it
the effects of those things on your body could promote conditions that could lead to an injury developing.
Great. Thanks. Before we go, do you have any studies coming up that you want to announce or promote or that people can be part of?
Well, the one that's ongoing right now, I am still in the process. I'm looking for drum instructors who teach primarily at high schools or through college or university post-secondary music programs, because I'm interviewing drum instructors about the reasons why they do or don't teach their students about injury prevention. So if you are a high school or post-secondary drum kit instructor, it's posted on my Facebook, Instagram, all my socials at Dr. Nadia Azar. If you meet the criteria for the study and you're interested, then my contact information is on there too. We're still looking for participants for that study. So,
great. Awesome. Thank you so much, folks.
Thanks.
Watch this. And if you didn't catch it from the beginning, rewind, watch it from the beginning, put in questions, comments, tell your story. If you're dealing with a drumming injury, or if you're not sure, or if you know you've gotten past one, let us know how, especially if it's something you've learned on our show that we've been doing for, I think last month was 3 years, actually, because that's when you were out here, September, 3 years ago.
I think it was 4 years ago. I think it was 2018.
Oh, wow. Was it?
I think it's even longer.
That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah, because
you're right.
It was before we did the NAMM show, and that was 2019.
19, you're right. Oh, wow. Where does the time go?
4 years. I know.
So hopefully you folks are learning something and applying it. Let us know and watch for more fun Drum Talk TV stuff. And of course, more drumming injury talk with Dr. Nadia next month. Thanks, everybody.